Hey everyone, welcome back to Pearson Plus. My name's Andy, and I'm here to help you with some human anatomy today. We're going to look at some diagrams, dig into some vocabulary, see if we can't make some sense of this. So let me share my screen and talk about this position. It's called standard anatomical position. It's actually quite important. It's quite important because as we're studying anatomy, we need to have a common language. We need to have a reference point that we all start from. This position is your classic anatomical position, which includes the human standing up, facing forward, arms slightly a gap from the body there, a little space in between the feet, and the palms facing forward. So that when we start naming planes, we start naming directional terms, we all know that we're starting from the same place. This is the place where we're starting from. This is just the backside of the anatomical position, but it still qualifies. Okay, let's dig in a little further beyond this. We can examine things, and it's quite often it's useful to examine things in anatomy based on their relation to certain planes. Okay, so this diagram, we can see our human is in the standard anatomical position. Feet are touching there, but for the most part, standard anatomical position, palms forward. And we can talk about the planes that we can investigate through. So let's talk about the frontal plane first. And the frontal plane is going to be the one that sort of, you want to think of it as cutting from, in this case, cutting through ear to ear and cutting a front. And on the backside, not pictured, would be a back. And the frontal plane, easy to remember because it cuts you into a front and a back. And so the frontal plane, humans are bilaterally symmetrical, left to right, but not front to back. Our fronts and our backs are not the same. So when you cut a frontal plane, if it's right down the middle, you still do not get symmetrical parts on the front and the back of the frontal plane. We'll talk about anterior and posterior here in a minute. The sagittal plane, however, is this front to back sort of slice. If you want to think of it going right through the head and through the nose, so it's going through this way. Humans are bilaterally symmetrical, so we do have a left and a right that are symmetrical. Are they identical? Most people not. I think I've seen lots of studies where they examine the left and right side of someone's face, and they take two lefts and put them together, and two rights and put them together, and you can see that there are some subtle differences. But essentially, when it comes to gross anatomy, the right side and the left side in normal conditions are going to be symmetrical. So the sagittal plane, if it is right down the center, it can be a mid-sagittal plane, only if it's right down the middle. It can also be called a perisagittal plane if it is off to the left a little bit or off to the right a little bit. So if that sagittal plane cut through the collarbone and down through the side of the body here and through one leg, obviously the sides wouldn't be equal. So that would be a perisagittal dissection, cutting it down that way. The transverse plane is, you can see it, it's going across this way and cutting it into a top and a bottom. And again, that transverse plane can be way up here by the head, way down here by the toe, or right in the middle. So those are our three basic planes that we can dissect the human body through to investigate and learn more. So now we've got this, I'm going to backtrack, standard anatomical position. We've got the three basic planes that they can be right down the middle, or they can be a little left or a little right, or they can be anywhere across the body, up, down, left, right, and you can see all the different changes there. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting and a little bit more detailed. I'm going to slide my face down here just a touch so you can see all the terms. So now what we have to be careful of is we have to look at the vocabulary and match it to the visual and make sure we're making those connections, okay? So I'm going to start on this diagram here. Standard anatomical position, probably better if his palms are facing forward, but we're going to look at this midline right now, and we're going to look at the body cavity from the pelvis through the head, all right? Here's our midline. If you are referring to something that is closer to that midline, we're going to refer to that as medial. So the medial means it is closer into the midline. Lateral means further away from the midline. So these are two relative terms, medial and lateral, meaning towards or away from the midline. All right, so again, we're looking at this midline right here. where you have a right side and a left side, that midline, which would be a mid-sagittal plane, that if it was cut right through that dotted line, things closer, medial, things further away, lateral. But look at these other terms. There's distal and proximal on here as well, because now those terms are going to refer to the appendages. So we could use them to talk about the arms. We can use them to talk about the legs. Distal means farther away from the point of attachment. So here's our point of attachment for the arm. It's the shoulder. So if something is distal, it is further away from the point of attachment. If it's proximal, it's working back closer to the point of attachment. So in this case, the bicep muscle here is proximal to the forearm. And you could say the fingers in the hand is distal to the elbow. On the legs, same thing. Point of attachment is up here by the hips. Proximal means closer to the body. Distal means farther away. So we have toes distal to knees, thighs proximal to calves. You've got those sort of relational terms, and they are relational. Over here, we've got some new terms. I've got anterior, posterior. I see superior, inferior. We got a little review of proximal and distal. We just did those over here. And we've got ventral and dorsal. So let's take them one at a time. Let's start with anterior and posterior. Anterior means towards the front. So as this human is faced this way, and that's a side view of standard anatomical position, anterior is going to be the direction he's facing. Posterior is going to be the direction behind him. Now, oops, sorry about that. Now, you'll also see that ventral and dorsal are the same, and that could be a little confusing at times. But really, truly, they're only the same because as a human, we're walking on 2 feet and we're upright. And so anterior and ventral, it's the same. Anterior means facing forward and towards the front, and posterior means towards the rear. Ventral technically means towards the belly, towards the abdomen, and dorsal means towards the back or towards the spine in this case. So when a human is standing upright, anterior facing forward and ventral happen to be the same. But imagine if this person was not in the standard anatomical position. Instead, they were on all fours, like bear crawling. Now, anterior is still going to be the direction they're facing, the direction they're heading, facing. Ventral is going to be towards their belly, which would actually be towards the ground. Posterior would be behind them, but dorsal would be up because their back would be up. So you get a 90-degree separation. They would be perpendicular here. Superior means towards the head. Inferior means below. So this is above and below. So now with all of these different terms, you can start doing a deeper dive into the anatomical position by talking about things that are relative to other things. So these are some of our basic terms. There are some others. We've done, you might even see ipsilateral and contralateral at times. So lateral means away from the midline. Ready? Ipsilateral means on the same side. Contralateral means on the opposite side. So ipsi, the prefix ipsi means same or equal. So ipsilateral means same side. Gosh darn it, sorry about that. Contralateral would be the opposite side. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick review and then we'll wrap it up. Standard anatomical position, pretty straightforward. The planes, we've got sagittal, which creates a left and a right. The frontal, which creates a front and a back. And a transverse, which creates a top and a bottom. Okay, then we've got all of our directional terms here as well. Medial and lateral, reference to the midline. Distal and proximal for the appendages. Anterior and posterior. Ventral and dorsal. Superior above, inferior below. And you've got a nice set of tools to use to really dig into our studies. All right, so I hope that was helpful, and feel free to go back and review that when you need to. And you're going to find that human anatomy is very vocabulary intense, and the more we practice, the better we get. All right, hope you're doing great with your anatomy work, and keep on working hard and doing your best, and you can do hard things. All right, we'll see you next time here on Pearson Plus.